When Sarah Thompson first stepped off the transport truck at the sniper training camp, the ground beneath her boots felt heavier than usual. The base was far out in the desert, surrounded by sand, wind, and silence. Rows of dusty tents stood in the heat, and the air smelled like gun oil and metal. Every direction she looked, there were men. Soldiers laughing, adjusting their rifles, cleaning their scopes, and talking loudly as if they already owned the place. Sarah stood out immediately. She was the only woman in the entire group of 32 recruits. Some of the men stopped what they were doing and stared. Others whispered to each other, pretending not to notice her. One of them chuckled under his breath, and another elbowed his friend with a smirk. She could already tell what they were thinking. What's she doing here? Sarah adjusted her cap and straightened her shoulders. She wasn't new to the army. She had served for 4 years as a marksman. But sniper school was different. This was the elite level. Only the best shooters got here. She had trained hard, worked longer hours than anyone else in her unit, and passed the toughest tests. Yet, as she walked toward the line of recruits, she could feel every eye on her like a weight pressing down on her back. Name? The instructor barked. Lieutenant Sarah Thompson, sir. The instructor, Sergeant Major Hale, looked at her for a moment. His face was unreadable. Then he simply nodded and pointed to the group. Fall in, Thompson. She joined the line. A few soldiers shifted to make space, though one of them muttered something she didn't catch. She ignored it. She knew better than to react. In the army, respect wasn't given, it was earned. The first few days were brutal. The sun rose early and burned hot across the range. Every morning began with long runs, drills, and target practice that pushed everyone to their limits. Sarah kept up step for step. She never complained, even when the blisters on her hands burst from the constant grip of her rifle. She kept her focus on one thing, the target. But not everyone saw it that way. During the first shooting test, her rifle jammed halfway through the exercise. It was a small mechanical issue, but to the watching men, it was a perfect moment to laugh. Guess she's not built for this, one of them said loudly. Another voice added, maybe she should try cooking, not shooting. Sarah heard every word. Her face stayed calm, but her stomach tightened. She cleared the jam quickly, reloaded, and continued shooting. Shot after shot hit the targets one after another until the last one fell. She had missed only 3. When she turned back, some of the men had stopped laughing, but others still grinned like they were waiting for her to mess up again. That night, after dinner, Sarah sat alone at the cleaning station, taking apart her rifle piece by piece. The metal parts gleamed under the low light. Around her, most of the others were relaxing, talking, playing cards, or joking about the day. She worked quietly, her mind repeating every movement, every sound. Clean, oil, reassemble, breathe. She wasn't just maintaining her rifle. She was preparing herself. Every click and snap of metal was a promise. She wouldn't let them be right about her. One of the instructors walked by and stopped. You're still at it, Thompson? He asked, sounding a bit surprised. Yes, sir, she said without looking up. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. Discipline like that will take you far, he said before walking off. She didn't smile, but his words gave her a small spark of strength. Days turned into weeks. The mocking didn't stop completely, but it started to fade as Sarah proved herself again and again. During obstacle runs, she was never last. During night training, she hit targets most of the others couldn't even see. She didn't boast. She didn't talk back. She just worked, steady, silent, focused. Still, there were moments that tested her patience. Once, a soldier deliberately took her spot on the range and told her to wait for the big boys to finish. Sarah just nodded and waited. When it was finally her turn, she made every shot count, each bullet finding the center perfect and precise. When she turned back, the man who had mocked her didn't say a word. But even with her growing skill, she still felt like an outsider. At meals, the men sat together, laughing about old missions or hometown stories. She sat a few seats away, listening quietly. Sometimes, she missed home. The small town where she grew up, the quiet fields where she first learned to shoot cans off a fence with her father's old rifle. She remembered his words. "It's not about who doubts you, Sarah. It's about never doubting yourself." That thought stayed with her every day. It became her armor against the whispers, her strength during the long nights, and her focus on the range. She knew respect wouldn't come fast, but she didn't need it yet. She just needed one chance to show them what she could really do. And deep down, she knew that when that moment came, no one would ever laugh again. The sun rose early over the desert base, painting everything gold and red. Another day of sniper training had begun, and Sarah Thompson was already awake before the alarm. She had learned quickly that being first to rise helped her avoid the stares and the jokes that came every morning. She tied her boots, adjusted her uniform, and walked toward the range where the others were gathering. The men were loud as usual, joking with each other, their laughter echoing across the sand. When Sarah joined the line, the noise quieted for a second. Then one of them, a tall soldier named Carter, smirked. "Morning, princess," he said. A few others laughed. Sarah didn't respond. She kept her eyes straight, her face calm. They didn't understand her silence. They thought it meant weakness, but really it meant focus. She had promised herself she wouldn't fight with words, only with skill. Still, the teasing never stopped. Whenever she made a small mistake, even something simple like dropping a magazine or missing one target, someone always had something to say. During a long-distance shooting test one afternoon, Sarah was paired with Carter. They had to take turns spotting and shooting targets placed hundreds of meters away. Carter looked at her rifle and said, "That thing's too heavy for you, Thompson. Maybe you should ask for a smaller one." His tone was playful, but his eyes were mocking. Sarah said nothing. She lay flat on her stomach, adjusted her scope, and focused on the target far ahead. A small metal plate barely visible in the sun. She slowed her breathing, counted silently in her head, and pulled the trigger. The sound of the shot cut through the wind. A second later, the plate rang with a perfect hit. Carter blinked, a little surprised, but tried to hide it with a grin. "Lucky shot," he said. Sarah handed him the spotting scope calmly. "Your turn." When he missed his first two shots, she didn't say a word. She just noted the wind direction and made small marks in her notebook. Inside, she felt a quiet satisfaction. Not pride, but proof that she belonged there. But the others didn't stop teasing. During lunch, she overheard two of them whispering near the mess tent. "You see her shoot today? She thinks she's one of us." "Yeah," the other replied. "Won't last long. The desert eats people like her alive." Sarah kept her head down and continued eating. She didn't let them see that it hurt. She had grown used to it, the looks, the laughter, the way people doubted her just because she was different. But deep inside, every word was like a spark in a fire she was building, a fire that kept her going. That evening, the recruits had a timed shooting challenge. They had to hit 10 targets as fast as possible. The sun was low, and the wind had picked up, making it even harder. One by one, the men took their turns. Carter scored 8 hits. The instructor nodded, impressed. Then it was Sarah's turn. As she stepped up, someone in the back muttered, "Let's see if she can even load it this time." A few snickers followed. Sarah ignored them. She took her position, loaded her rifle smoothly, and waited for the signal. "Begin!" She fired the first shot, clang. Hit. Second shot, clang. Third, clang. The rhythm was steady, her movements sharp and precise. Dust blew around her face, but she didn't flinch. Her world had narrowed down to one thing, the target. When the 10th shot echoed through the range, silence followed. All 10 targets had fallen. Even the instructor seemed surprised. He looked down at his clipboard and said quietly, 10 out of 10. Fastest time so far. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of the soldiers clapped slowly, half sarcastic. "Guess even a broken clock is right sometimes," he said. A few others laughed, but their voices sounded weaker this time. Uncertain, uneasy. They were starting to see that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't what they thought. That night, Sarah cleaned her rifle again, sitting alone by the light of a small lamp. The metal gleamed, her hands moving carefully, almost lovingly. Across the camp, the men were still joking and laughing, but she didn't listen anymore. She thought about the targets she hit, the way the instructor's voice had changed when he said her score. It wasn't respect yet, but it was the beginning of something close. Still, she felt the weight of loneliness. She had no one to talk to, no one to share her small victories with. But maybe that was the price of proving herself. Maybe this was what it meant to stand alone in a place that didn't believe in you. As the night grew colder, she looked out over the range. The same stretch of sand and steel that had tried to break her spirit. "I'll make them see," she whispered to herself. "One day, they'll stop laughing." She didn't know that the day was closer than anyone expected. And that soon, the jokes would turn into silence, replaced by something far more serious. Because soon, the range wouldn't just be for training anymore. The days at the sniper camp were long and hot, and time moved slowly. Every morning started before sunrise, when the desert was still cool and quiet. The soldiers would line up with their rifles, their breath making small clouds in the cold air. Sarah Thompson was always there early, ready before the others. She didn't talk much, but she listened, she watched, and she learned. Most of the men still didn't include her in their small groups. They worked in pairs, shared jokes, or helped each other fix gear. But when Sarah walked by, the laughter often stopped. She could feel their eyes on her, not with kindness, but with doubt. Still, she never showed how it made her feel. She had learned to stay calm, to keep her emotions hidden behind steady eyes. Instead of wasting time worrying about what others thought, Sarah focused on improving. Every evening, when the others went to rest or play cards, she stayed at the shooting range. The desert wind was colder at night, and the sky was full of stars. She practiced breathing slowly, counting in her head, aiming at distant shadows just to keep her hands steady. Sometimes Sergeant Major Hale would walk by, watching her quietly. He was a tough man, respected by everyone, but not easy to please. One night, after seeing her stay late again, he stopped beside her. "You know, Thompson," he said, his voice rough but calm, "most soldiers lose patience before they learn control. You've got patience. Don't waste it." Sarah looked at him, surprised. She nodded and said softly, "Thank you, sir." That small moment meant more to her than any medal could. It was the first time someone had seen her not as a woman trying to fit in, but as a soldier trying to be great. The next few weeks became a test of endurance. The trainees had to hike miles with full gear, survive in the field with limited supplies, and shoot accurately under stress. Many struggled. Some even thought about quitting. But Sarah kept going one step at a time. Her body ached. Her shoulders burned from the heavy rifle, but she never slowed down. During one long march through the desert hills, Carter, the same soldier who had once called her princess, started to fall behind. His leg was hurting, and the heat was unbearable. Sarah noticed and walked beside him silently. Without a word, she helped him adjust his backpack straps so it would be lighter. He didn't thank her, but he didn't stop her either. For the first time, he saw that she wasn't weak. She was tougher than most of them. Back at camp, when everyone rested, Sarah cleaned her rifle again. Her hands moved with the same rhythm every night. Open, clean, oil, reassemble. The weapon had become part of her. It was like an old friend. One that never laughed at her, never doubted her, never betrayed her. She took care of it because it was her way of staying grounded. One night, a sandstorm hit the camp. The wind screamed through the tents, and dust filled the air. Everyone ran to secure their gear. Sarah was out on the range when it started. Instead of running back immediately, she covered her rifle with her jacket and held it close until the storm passed. When she returned, covered in dust, the others stared. One of the instructors shook his head and said, "You really don't give up, do you?" Sarah just smiled faintly. "Not when it matters, sir." After that day, something started to change. The men didn't talk as much around her anymore. Not because they ignored her, but because they were beginning to respect her. They saw her effort, her silence, her focus. She wasn't trying to be better than them. She was just trying to be her best. And that quiet determination made them think differently. One evening, during target practice, she noticed one of the newer recruits struggling with his scope. He couldn't line up his aim properly. Sarah walked over, showed him how to adjust it, and explained how to control breathing before shooting. He nodded, a little embarrassed, but grateful. It was the first time someone looked at her not as a rival, but as a teammate. Later, when she hit 3 long-range targets in a row, even Carter gave a small nod. It wasn't a smile, but it was a start. At night, as she lay in her tent, Sarah thought about how far she had come. She wasn't the scared outsider anymore. She had faced every doubt and turned it into strength. The jokes and laughter had faded, replaced by quiet respect. Still, she knew this was only the beginning. Sniper training wasn't just about shooting, it was about surviving, thinking, and staying calm under pressure. She often remembered what her father had once told her when she was young and learning to shoot. The best shooters aren't the loudest. They're the quiet ones who never miss. Now she finally understood what he meant. Being loud, arguing, or trying to prove herself with words would have done nothing. But being calm, patient, and focused had started to change everything. She was no longer there to prove that a woman could shoot. She was there to prove that she could shoot better than anyone. And as the stars faded into dawn, she promised herself that she would not stop until every person at that camp knew it. She didn't know that her biggest test was just around the corner. A test that no training could prepare her for. A test that would turn the quiet training field into a real battlefield. The morning air was sharp and cold when the trainees were told to pack their gear. Sergeant Major Hale stood in front of them, his voice firm and serious. "You've all done well so far," he said. "But now it's time to see how you handle the real environment. We're heading into the mountains for field training. Out there, it's not about comfort. It's about survival." The group of soldiers exchanged quick glances. Everyone had heard stories about the mountain range. How it was full of steep cliffs, freezing winds, and endless silence. It was where the final phase of sniper training took place. Sarah Thompson packed her rifle carefully, checking every part twice. She made sure her ammunition was dry, her scope was clean, and her canteen was full. The others rushed through it, laughing and talking as if it were just another drill. But Sarah knew better. She had learned that the small things, a clean barrel, a clear lens, a steady breath, made all the difference. The trucks took them far from the base, up winding dirt roads that seemed to go on forever. When they finally stopped, all Sarah could see were rocky hills and endless gray clouds. The wind cut through their uniforms like knives. It was quiet, too quiet. "Welcome to the range," Sergeant Hale said. "For the next 5 days, you'll eat, sleep, and train out here. You'll live like snipers. Unseen, unheard, and accurate." The first day was hard. They had to climb ridges with heavy packs, set up hidden positions, and hit targets from impossible distances. Many of the men missed their shots, frustrated by the wind and the thin mountain air. But Sarah seemed calm. She studied the wind direction by watching how the dust moved, adjusted her aim, and waited patiently before firing. When her shot hit the farthest target, over 900 meters away, even Sergeant Hale raised an eyebrow. "Good shot, Thompson," he said simply. For Sarah, those 3 words meant more than applause. It was a quiet victory. By the second day, everyone was tired. The cold nights made it hard to sleep, and their hands were stiff in the mornings. Sarah's fingers felt numb, but she kept working. While others complained, she kept her focus. When she wasn't shooting, she was studying the terrain, learning how the mountains spoke. The way sound carried, the way shadows moved, and how the air changed before the wind shifted. Some of the soldiers began to notice. Even Carter, who used to make fun of her, started asking small questions. "How did you judge the distance on that last target?" he asked one evening. Sarah showed him how to use the scope marks to measure the range. He nodded slowly, realizing she wasn't just good. She was better than most of them. On the 4th night, the sky turned dark and stormy. Thunder rolled over the hills, and the wind howled like a beast. Their tents shook as rain poured down. Everyone struggled to keep their equipment dry. Sarah stayed awake most of the night, protecting her rifle under her jacket and checking on the others. At dawn, They were supposed to start another training round. But as they prepared their gear, Sergeant Hale received a sudden radio call. His face changed serious, sharp. "Listen up," he shouted. "We've got a situation. A convoy from the nearby base was attacked not far from here. We're the closest unit. Command wants us to assist until reinforcements arrive." The camp went silent. No one moved for a moment. This wasn't a drill anymore. This was real. Within minutes, everyone geared up. The laughter was gone. The jokes had disappeared. Sarah felt her heart beating faster, but her mind was clear. She checked her rifle again, adjusted her scope, and followed the group toward the valley below where smoke was rising in the distance. As they reached a high ridge, the sound of gunfire echoed through the air. Real bullets, real danger. The smell of smoke and burning fuel filled the wind. Below them, they could see a small convoy under attack by unknown fighters. "Positions," Hale ordered. "Cover the convoy from here." The soldiers scrambled to set up their rifles, but many were shaking, unsure of what to do. It was their first real combat. Sarah moved calmly, lying flat on the ground, her rifle steady on a rock. She scanned the valley through her scope, spotting the attackers moving between the trees. 2 o'clock behind the boulders," she called out. Her voice was steady, clear. "Range 600 meters. Carter, beside her, followed her lead. Together, they began firing slow, controlled, accurate. One by one, the attackers fell. Sarah adjusted for wind, called corrections for others, and kept everyone focused. Bullets whizzed over their heads, but she didn't flinch. She remembered her training: breathe, aim, fire. Her heart raced, but her hands stayed steady. After nearly half an hour, the gunfire stopped. The attackers retreated into the hills, leaving the valley silent once again. The convoy below was damaged but safe. Sergeant Hale looked around at his trainees. His expression was mixed with relief and pride. His eyes stopped on Sarah. "Thompson," he said quietly, "you kept your head when everyone else lost theirs. That's what a sniper does." The others looked at her differently now. Not as a woman, not as a joke, but as a soldier who had just proven herself when it mattered most. As they packed up to return to camp, Sarah felt the weight of what had happened. It wasn't just another training day. Something had changed, not just in how they saw her, but in how she saw herself. For the first time, she wasn't just trying to belong. She did belong. And deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. The mountain range had tested her patience, but real life had just tested her courage. The mountain air was still cold the next morning, but everything felt different. The gunfire from the day before still echoed in everyone's minds. The soldiers moved quietly, their faces serious. The jokes, the laughter, the careless talk, all gone. They had seen what real danger looked like, and they knew how close they had come to losing their lives. Sarah Thompson woke before dawn as usual. She sat outside her tent, watching the first light touch the mountains. Her rifle lay across her knees, clean and ready. She replayed yesterday's events in her mind. The smoke, the shouting, the sound of real bullets cutting through the air. It hadn't felt like a movie. It had been real, raw, and terrifying. Yet through it all, she had stayed calm. That was what surprised her most. She had always wondered how she would react under real fire. Now she knew. She had not frozen, not panicked. She had done her job. As the others woke up, Sarah could feel their eyes on her. No one said it out loud, but the respect was there. Carter, who used to mock her, walked by and nodded slightly. "Good shooting yesterday," he said quietly. It wasn't much, but coming from him, it meant everything. Sergeant Major Hale called everyone together. His voice carried over the wind. "Yesterday you saw what real combat looks like," he said, "and you handled it better than I expected. But don't think it's over. This area isn't fully secure. There might still be enemies nearby. Stay sharp." The soldiers nodded, checking their weapons. The plan was to continue training but stay ready for anything. The range had turned into something more than a classroom now. It had become dangerous ground. By noon, the sun was high and the heat felt heavy. The team was spread across the ridge, practicing observation drills. Sarah was lying flat on her stomach, her eye pressed to her scope, scanning the valley below. The wind moved gently across the dry grass. Everything looked calm, too calm. Then, through her scope, she saw something. A small flash of light from the far ridge, like sunlight hitting metal. It was the kind of reflection a rifle scope would make. Her stomach tightened. She reached for her radio. "Sergeant Hale," she said quickly. "Possible movement on the east ridge, about 800 meters. Before Hale could answer, a loud crack echoed through the mountains. A bullet hit the dirt just meters from their position. Another followed, and then another. "Take cover," Hale shouted. The trainees scattered, diving behind rocks and small boulders. Dust flew everywhere. The quiet mountain range was now a real battlefield again. Sarah's hands moved automatically. She adjusted her scope, found the flash again, and spotted 3 armed men moving fast along the ridge. They weren't part of any training exercise. These were real insurgents. 3 targets, she called out to Carter, who was beside her. 2 are advancing, 1 staying back with a scope. Carter looked terrified, his hands shaking slightly as he loaded his rifle. Sarah placed her hand on his shoulder. "Breathe," she said calmly. "Just like training." Her voice steadied him. Together they aimed. She counted under her breath. 1, 2, fire. Their shots rang out together. The first man went down instantly. The other 2 ducked behind rocks, returning fire. Bullets flew past them, hitting the stones so close that shards of rock sprayed in the air. Sarah kept her breathing slow. She tracked the second man through her scope. He moved fast, but she waited, patient, focused. When his shoulder appeared from behind the rock, she fired once. The man dropped. The third one tried to run. Carter fired and missed. Sarah took a second longer, adjusted for wind, and pulled the trigger. The bullet hit its mark. Silence followed. The mountains were still again. Smoke hung in the air, and the smell of gunpowder filled her lungs. "Clear," Sarah said softly into her radio. Sergeant Hale and the rest of the team regrouped. No one spoke for a while. The tension was thick. Finally, Hale looked at Sarah. "You just saved this unit," he said firmly. "If you hadn't spotted them first, we'd be dead." Carter exhaled shakily, still staring at the ridge. He looked at Sarah and said, "You didn't just shoot. You led us." Sarah didn't smile. She just nodded. "We did it together," she replied. The soldiers slowly started to relax. Some sat down, their hands still trembling. It had been another close call, too close. But this time, there was no doubt who had made the difference. As the sun began to set, Sarah sat alone for a moment, staring at the sky turning orange and pink. Her hands were steady now, but inside, she could still feel the rush of adrenaline. The line between training and real battle had completely disappeared. She thought about all the times they had laughed at her, doubted her, ignored her. Those memories didn't hurt anymore. They just reminded her of how far she had come. She wasn't the outsider now. She was the one who had seen danger coming, who had stayed calm, who had acted when it mattered most. That night, around the campfire, the men were quieter than usual. No one joked. No one teased. Instead, they talked about teamwork, about staying alert, and about what it felt like to face real bullets for the first time. Carter sat next to Sarah, poking the fire with a stick. "You know," he said, "when you first got here, I thought you'd quit in a week." Sarah looked at him, her face lit by the firelight. "I thought the same about you," she said with a small smile. He laughed softly. "Fair enough." For the first time, the laughter around the fire wasn't mocking. It was real, the kind that comes from respect. Sarah lay awake later that night, listening to the wind outside her tent. The mountains were quiet again, but she knew now how quickly peace could turn into chaos. She closed her eyes, thinking of one simple truth. You never know what you're made of until the bullets start flying. The night after the attack was cold and silent. The soldiers slept lightly, their rifles beside them, boots still on, ready for anything. Even the wind seemed to move carefully, as if afraid to disturb the quiet. Sarah Thompson lay awake, staring at the tent ceiling. Every time she closed her eyes, she could hear the sound of gunfire again, the echo bouncing through the mountains. She took a deep breath and sat up. She wasn't scared anymore, just alert. Something inside her had changed. She no longer felt like a trainee or an outsider. She felt like a sniper, calm, focused, and responsible. At sunrise, Sergeant Hale called everyone together. His tone was steady but serious. "We're not done here," he said. "Our orders are to stay until the area is secure. Keep your heads clear, stay sharp, and trust your team." Sarah nodded. Around her, the men listened quietly. There was no joking, no laughter anymore. They all respected her now, especially after what she'd done the day before. Even Carter followed her lead without hesitation. By noon, they were back on the ridge, scanning the valley. The sky was bright, and the air shimmered with heat. Everything looked peaceful, but no one trusted that peace anymore. Sarah was lying low behind a rock, her rifle set up perfectly, her eye against the scope. She could see the entire valley below, every shadow, every small movement. Carter was beside her, using binoculars to watch another direction. Hours passed. The silence was heavy, broken only by the wind. Then, suddenly, Sarah saw something that made her heart stop. In the distance, near a dried-out riverbed, a small group of armed men was moving, at least 6 of them. They were carrying heavy weapons, heading straight toward the convoy site they had defended earlier. Sarah pressed her radio. "Sergeant Hale, this is Thompson. I've got visual, 6 hostiles approaching from the south ridge, moving fast." "Copy that," Hale's voice came back. "Hold your position. Do not engage until I give the order." Sarah's finger rested lightly on the trigger. She could feel her pulse slowing down, not speeding up. That calmness, that stillness she had practiced for months, now took over. She adjusted her scope for distance and wind, watching the men get closer. Carter whispered, "They're too many." Sarah didn't look away. "We'll manage," she said softly. The enemy reached the valley floor and started spreading out. They were planning to attack again. Then, without warning, one of them looked up and pointed. They had seen something. The quiet ended in an instant. Gunfire exploded from below. Bullets tore through the air, hitting rocks around them. Carter ducked low, breathing fast. Sarah stayed still, her cheek pressed to the rifle stock, eyes locked on her scope. She didn't panic. She didn't even blink. "2 down," she whispered after firing twice. "4 left." Her voice was steady, almost calm. Each time she spoke, the others nearby seemed to find courage. Sergeant Hale was shouting orders through the radio, trying to keep the team coordinated. "Thompson, can you cover the right flank?" "Copy that," she answered instantly. She shifted her position slightly, scanned through her scope again, and spotted 2 men trying to move behind a large rock formation. She adjusted her aim, breathed out slowly, and fired once, then twice. Both targets fell. Carter peeked over the ridge and stared at her. "You're not even shaking," he said, amazed. Sarah didn't respond. She just kept watching, eyes sharp and cold like glass. "That's the point," she said quietly. "You shake later." The remaining attackers tried to retreat, firing randomly as they ran. Sarah tracked the last one. A man carrying a radio, probably calling for help. She hesitated for a brief moment, her finger tightening on the trigger. She knew that if he called for backup, more lives could be at risk. She took a deep breath and pulled the trigger. The shot was clean and final. The valley fell silent again. Only the wind moved now, carrying the smell of dust and smoke. "Area clear," Sarah reported. Her voice was soft, but confident. Sergeant Hale came over the radio again. "Confirmed. Excellent work, team." "Thompson, that was textbook calm under fire." The men started cheering quietly, relief washing over them. Carter patted Sarah on the shoulder. "You just saved us again," he said. She shook her head. "We all saved each other." But inside, she knew what she had done. She had led without shouting, fought without fear, and stayed calm when everything around her was chaos. When they finally regrouped, Hale looked at her with pride. Thompson, he said, what you did today, that's the mark of a sniper. You didn't lose control, and because of that, no one here died. Sarah nodded respectfully. Thank you, sir. That night, as the team rested, Sarah sat by the small campfire, her rifle beside her as always. The stars above looked brighter than usual. Carter sat nearby, silent for a while before saying, You know, I used to think you were just quiet because you were scared. Sarah smiled faintly. And now, he chuckled. Now I think you're quiet because you don't need to talk. You just do. She looked back at the fire, the flames dancing in her eyes. Sometimes silence is stronger than shouting, she said softly. The night grew colder, but she didn't feel it. Her hands were steady, her heart was calm, and for the first time, she felt like she truly belonged. She had proven herself, not just to the others but to herself. In the distance, the mountains stood dark and silent, as if guarding her secret. No one laughed at her anymore. They had seen who she really was, not just a soldier, not just a sniper, but the calm in the middle of the storm. The morning after the battle, the camp was quiet. The desert air was cold, and the sky was painted in shades of orange and gold. The soldiers moved slowly, packing their gear, checking their weapons, and cleaning up what was left of the temporary camp. But something felt different now. There was no noise, no teasing, no laughter. Everyone had changed a little after what happened. They had faced real danger, and for the first time they had seen what war truly looked like. Sarah Thompson sat alone near the edge of the camp, cleaning her rifle carefully. The sunlight reflected off the metal, and a soft breeze brushed her hair. She worked in silence, but her thoughts were deep. She remembered every sound, every movement from the day before. The way her heart had slowed when she took each shot, the fear in Carter's eyes, the chaos below. Even now, it didn't feel real. Sergeant Hale walked over, his boots crunching on the gravel. You didn't sleep, did you? He asked, standing beside her. Sarah gave a small smile. Not much, sir. Too quiet now. He nodded. That's normal. After the first real fight, the silence feels louder. She looked up at him. Is it always like this? Hale paused for a moment before replying. No. It gets easier to handle, but it never stops feeling real. That's how you know you still care. He sat down beside her, looking out at the horizon. You did well, Thompson. Better than anyone could have asked for. You kept calm. You protected your team, and you didn't lose focus. Thank you, sir, she said quietly. Hale turned toward her and added, You've got something rare. Control under pressure. Most soldiers never find that balance. You did. He looked at her for a long moment before standing up again. Pack up your things. We're moving out in an hour. You've earned your spot, sniper. Sarah froze for a second, realizing what he had just said. Sniper. Not trainee, not rookie sniper. For the first time since joining the camp, she smiled fully. It wasn't pride that she felt, it was peace. She had worked for this moment with everything she had. When she went back to her tent, Carter and the other soldiers were getting ready. They looked up as she entered. No one said anything for a moment. Then Carter stepped forward, holding out a canteen. You earned this, sniper, he said, grinning. Sarah laughed softly. Thanks, Carter. From that moment, everything changed. The respect that had taken weeks to earn was now real. The men no longer saw her as someone who didn't belong. She was one of them. As they packed and started marching back toward base, Sarah walked near the front. The path was long, and the sun was harsh, but she felt lighter than she had in months. Every step reminded her how far she had come, from being laughed at during training to being trusted with the most dangerous shots. When they reached the base later that day, other soldiers came out to greet them. News of the fight had already spread. People whispered about the female sniper who stayed calm when everyone else ducked. Some didn't believe it. Others stared in quiet admiration. Sarah didn't care for fame or attention. She only wanted to prove that she was worthy, and she had done that. After debriefing, she went to the shooting range to clear her head. The range was empty, quiet except for the sound of the wind. She set up her rifle, took a deep breath, and aimed at a far-off target. The shot hit perfectly right in the center. But this time she didn't smile. She just closed her eyes and whispered, "For everyone who doubted me, thank you." She wasn't angry anymore. She understood now that the doubt, the laughter, the hard days, they had all made her stronger. Without them, she wouldn't have found this calm, this strength inside her. That night, the team gathered around a small fire near the base. The mood was relaxed. Someone played music from a radio, and for the first time, Sarah laughed freely with the others. Carter told a story about his first failed mission, making everyone laugh. Then he looked at Sarah and said, "You know, when I first met you, I thought you'd quit in a week." Sarah raised an eyebrow, smiling. "And now," he grinned, "now I'm just glad you didn't." They all laughed, the sound echoing through the camp. Later, when the fire burned low, Sarah looked up at the stars again. They looked the same as the night she first arrived, but she wasn't the same person anymore. She had gone through the fire and come out stronger. She thought about all the women and men who had been told they couldn't do something, who had been laughed at or ignored. She wished they could see that sometimes silence was the best answer to doubt. Sergeant Hale walked by before turning in for the night. "You've done good, Thompson," he said quietly. "But remember, this is just the beginning. Real missions are harder. The world out there doesn't wait for anyone." Sarah nodded. "I know, sir, but I'll be ready." He gave a small smile and left her by the fire. As she sat there, the flames reflected in her calm eyes. She had faced her fears, earned respect, and found her strength. The world had tested her and she had passed. Somewhere deep inside, she felt a new kind of confidence. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was becoming. And though she didn't know it yet, the calm she carried would one day save even more lives than she could imagine. Weeks passed after the desert mission. The soldiers had returned to their main base, and life slowly started to feel normal again. But for Sarah Thompson, nothing was truly the same. Something deep inside her had changed forever. She walked through the base quietly, carrying her sniper rifle across her shoulder like always. Wherever she went, people noticed her. They didn't laugh anymore. They didn't whisper behind her back. Now they nodded with respect. Some even saluted her with pride. But Sarah didn't care about being famous. She didn't want medals or attention. What mattered to her was the peace she felt every time she held her rifle. The calm that came when she focused, breathed, and aimed. She spent her days training new recruits, teaching them patience and focus. Most of them were young, nervous and excited, just like she had once been. They listened carefully when she spoke because they knew her story. Everyone knew now. One morning, as the sun rose over the base, Sarah stood in front of a group of trainees. "A sniper's job isn't just to shoot," she said softly. "It's to stay calm when no one else can. It's to protect your team, even when it means staying alone in the shadows. Remember, real strength is quiet." The young soldiers nodded, inspired by her words. To them, she was not just a sniper. She was a symbol of courage and control. After training, Sergeant Hale called her to his office. His voice, as always, was firm but warm. "Thompson," he said, "Command has been watching your progress. They're impressed. You've been selected for an advanced mission, overseas. Real-world operation. You up for it?" Sarah looked straight at him, her expression steady. "Yes, sir." He nodded. "Good. You've earned it." Then, after a pause, he added, "I've seen a lot of soldiers come and go, Thompson. But you've got something rare. Don't lose it." "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. That night, as she packed her gear, Sarah felt a strange mix of emotions. Pride, fear, and excitement. This time it wasn't training. It was real. But she was ready. Before leaving, she walked once more to the shooting range, the place where it had all started. The air was cool, and the moonlight made the sand shine softly. She lay down, set her rifle, and looked through the scope one last time. Her breath slowed, her hands were steady, and her heart was calm. Just as it had been the day everything changed. She took one perfect shot. The bullet hit the center of the target, echoing in the night. She smiled faintly. In that moment, she remembered everything. The laughter, the doubt, the long nights of training, the storm, the battle, and the silence that followed. Every hardship, every insult had led her here. She whispered to herself, "You did it." The next morning, she boarded the helicopter with her new team. Carter was there too, now one of her closest friends. He gave her a nod. "Guess we're really doing this, huh?" Sarah smiled. "Yeah, let's make it count." The helicopter lifted off, dust swirling beneath it, the sun rising over the desert one more time. Sarah looked out the window at the fading camp, the place where everything had begun. She knew she would never forget it. Months later, reports began spreading through military channels about a sniper who had saved an entire squad during an ambush in a faraway valley. The story sounded unbelievable. One shot taken from over a mile away, precise and calm under impossible pressure. At first, people thought it was just another rumor. But when they learned the sniper's name, everyone smiled. Sarah Thompson. Her story spread beyond the base, to training academies, to soldiers in other countries, even to civilians who admired bravery. They called her the Silent Eye. But Sarah never talked about what she had done. When reporters tried to interview her, she simply said, "It was my job. I just did what I was trained to do." To her, the medals and recognition didn't matter. What mattered was that her team had made it home safely. One evening, after returning from her latest mission, she sat alone outside her small cabin near the base. The sunset painted the sky red and gold. Her rifle leaned against the wall beside her, and a light wind moved through the quiet. Carter came by and sat next to her. "You know," he said, smiling, "you've become kind of a legend around here." Sarah laughed softly. "Legends are just stories people tell when they forget how human we all are." He looked at her for a moment. "Still, you changed things. Not just for us, but for everyone who'll come after. You made them believe." Sarah looked out at the horizon, her eyes calm and distant. "I didn't do it for belief," she said. "I did it because it was right." There was a long silence between them, the comfortable kind. The kind that didn't need words. As the last light of day faded, Sarah picked up her rifle and stood. "Come on," she said, smiling. "Let's train. The next generation needs to learn." And so she did. She trained, she guided, and she inspired. She never shouted, never bragged, never changed who she was. Years later, new soldiers would whisper her name with respect, though many had never met her. They'd tell the story of the quiet woman who was laughed at during sniper training, and who became one of the best marksmen in the field. And somewhere, in the calm desert night, the wind would carry her legend. Not as noise, but as silence. The kind of silence that means strength, focus, and peace. Because Sarah Thompson was never just a sniper. She was proof that the calmest hearts can survive the loudest storms. And though her story began with laughter and doubt, it ended with respect, and a name that no one would ever forget.